Good morning, everyone. We are exploring the rich and complicated history of Christianity and studying the Bible in context. We identify bad theology and misconceptions about God, the Bible, about hell, and following Jesus' teaching. If you find this video helpful, please let us know in the comment section below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. We are continuing on in our series on the Clobber passages. Today we're going to be covering the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. As I like to point out, this information is not new. This information has been out there a lot of times. If you'd like to follow up on it, I recommend God and the Gay Christian by Matthew Vines or Walking the Bridgeless Canyon by Kathy Baldock. Both books are easily available online. Okay, moving on. Here's today's questions for you. Sodom and Gomorrah, were they destroyed for being gay? What actually happened? Which sin doomed Sodom? What hospitality really means? Why contrast Abraham and Sodom? And what these stories teach us? Okay, as always, what do these stories teach us? So let's take a look at it. The Clobber passages, Sodom and Gomorrah from Genesis chapter 19. So what are the Clobber passages? They're a set of verses used to justify condemning and excluding members of the LGBTQ plus community. So oftentimes, you'll hear preachers, and some preachers really focus on these verses. They'll preach them over and over again. It's just a few of them within the Bible, but they're taken out of context, and we're going to try to put them back into context, sort of to de-weaponize them. So Genesis chapter 19, verses 1 through 38, that's the story of the cities on the plain, oftentimes simply referred to as Sodom and Gomorrah. You might see signs like this. What's this? First Baptist Church of Mayview. If gay is okay, God owes Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. If gay is okay, God owes Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. And of course, Pastor Bruce here, if God accepts gays, then why did he destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? Sodom's destruction in Genesis chapter 19 is about God's judgment on homosexuality. And it seems like we've heard sermons like this or preachers like this talk about this constantly. If you go to an IFB church, an independent fundamentalist Baptist, you will hear this almost weekly. So I got to tell you, this has not been the kind of preaching that we've always had. In fact, this became sort of a wedge issue in the late 70s that they began preaching these kind of sermons when religious right churches got into bed with the religious right political machine. All right, Genesis 19, 1 through 38. It's the story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities on the plain. It's one of the most misread and I believe deceitfully taught anti-gay passages. And I say deceitfully because the information of how to correctly interpret this passage has been out there for a long time, and yet they choose to misinterpret it. Sodom is not destroyed because of homosexuality. I think I can prove that. Homosexuals are not mentioned in the biblical story of Sodom, and I believe I can prove that as well. And finally, the Bible does clearly state why Sodom was destroyed, and it's not because of homosexuality. Now, oftentimes I will tell you, if someone says the Bible is very clear, it usually means they have not read it. Now, I can say, and I'm pretty sure I can prove it, there is a clear reason why Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. And the Bible does clearly tell you why. In fact, there's two very important passages that will tell you why. Genesis 19 is often broken away from its context. Genesis chapter 18 and Genesis chapter 19 are one long narrative establishing a comparison-contrast structure. So we have the story of Abraham encountering the angels and the story of the angels in Sodom. Or we could say it a different way. Abraham encountering the angels and Sodom encountering the angels. It's a comparison-contrast. How does Abraham respond and how does the city of Sodom respond to visitors in their midst? Genesis 18 describes Abraham's righteousness and hospitality with an emphasis on hospitality. It's his acts of hospitality that reflect that he is a righteous person. And so what chapter 18 is trying to tell you is if you want to be a righteous person, you need to be a person of hospitality. Genesis 19 describes Sodom's unrighteousness and inhospitality. It has nothing to do with sexuality. It's about they are an unrighteous city full of unrighteous people who are inhospitable. And it's their inhospitality that demonstrates the unrighteousness. Let's take a look at the passage here. Genesis 18:1-8. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great tree of Mamre, where he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. So here's just 3 random strangers who show up. 3 random people who show up, and Abraham goes out to greet them and treats them with respect. He bows low to the ground. He said, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under the tree. In other words, let me take care of you. Your feet are dirty from your journey. Let me wash them. Come rest under the tree. It's the heat of the day. You need some shade. You need some protection. Let me provide that for you. Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed and then go on your way. Now that you have come to your servant, very well, they answered, do as you say. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he said, get 3 seahs of fine flour and knead it to bake some bread. Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. So here just random strangers just sort of show up. He doesn't know who they are. He goes, he greets them, he treats them with respect. He begins to take care of them. Here's water to wash your feet. Find a cool place here. Get out of the heat. Let me provide you some food. He provides them not just food, but some of the best food, a choice tender calf. He treats these strangers very well. He's showing great hospitality. He's treating them as he would like to be treated if he were a stranger in the land. How many of you have ever been on a trip and you got lost somewhere? And you're like, oh my gosh, I just wish somebody would help us. Okay? Happened to me, happened to us, okay, in Beijing, China. We were on a tour in Beijing, China, and the bus left us behind. They claimed they counted. They're like, oh, but we counted, and we thought you weren't here. We thought you stayed at the hotel, so we left. So here we are stuck in Beijing, China, not speaking the language, not knowing where our hotel's at. Luckily, the restaurant staff were nice enough to help us out and contact the company and make sure that they came, they got us a cab, the cab driver, got us back to the hotel. See, that's how we want to be treated. That, hey, these strangers, they've been left behind, they're frightened, they don't know they don't know how to get back to where they need to go. Let's take care of them and make sure they get back to where they go. Luckily, they didn't drag us off some alley and mug us, right? Abraham's behavior is considered righteous behavior because of his hospitality. He's treating others. He's in right relationship with his brothers and sisters because of the way he's treating them. How we treat our fellow human beings indicates whether or not we're righteous. Hospitality shows love and care for the stranger in your midst. Now, this is a major theme with God because it shows up a lot in the Bible about loving and care for the strangers in your midst. In Exodus 22:21, it says, do not mistreat an alien or oppress him, for you were aliens in Egypt. This is one of those verses that the religious right seems to skip over. Do not oppress him. Do not mistreat an alien in your midst. And I can't say it's strong enough, but we have ICE agencies oppressing and mistreating people who've come into this country, undocumented, and it is a direct violation of what God has taught us to do. So you cannot stand behind a pulpit or sit in a pew and claim that it's okay when it's in direct violation to what God has taught us. Do not oppress an alien. You yourself know how it feels to be aliens because you were aliens in Egypt, Exodus 23:9. The alien living with you must be treated as one of your native born. Love him as yourself, for you were aliens in Egypt. I am the Lord your God, Leviticus 19:34. They love to quote verses from Leviticus and Deuteronomy and bring back, the law and say, well, this is what the Bible says, you got to follow it. Except when it comes to these verses. Keep on loving one another as brothers. Do not forget to entertain strangers. Do not forget to entertain strangers. For by so doing, some people have entertained angels without knowing it. This was Abraham. Remember those in prison as if they were fellow prisoners, and those who are mistreated as if you yourself were suffering. You see suffering, go and help it out. You should react to somebody who's being oppressed or suffering. It's part of our calling. This is something that's deep on the heart of God. Share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality, Romans 12:13. Now the overseer, you want to be an overseer, you want to be, a church elder or church deacon, must be above reproach, the husband of but one wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, and what? Hospitable, able to teach. Because if you're not hospitable, you're not above reproach. You're not righteous. This is one of those key markings to know whether or not that you are in right relationship with God and your fellow man. Are you hospitable? There's a theme that moves all throughout the Bible about God caring how you treat each other. Have modern evangelicals even read these verses? I begin to wonder because of the way that we treat other people. We have gotten to the point in the modern evangelical church where we have created outsiders. Other people were like, they're not part of us. They don't believe in God. They're demon-possessed, they're evil, they're trying to destroy us, we're in the middle of a culture war, they're our enemies, and we mistreat them, which is contrary to what God has taught us. In comparison to Abraham's righteousness, chapter 18, is how the men of Sodom treat the strangers in the midst. So the angels go from Abraham into the city of Sodom. This is your comparison contrast. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. So Lot, Abraham's nephew, shows hospitality. My lord, he said, please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night and then go on your way early in the morning. No, they answered, we'll spend the night in the square. So Lot goes, Abraham's nephew Lot goes, offers them hospitality. And they're like, no, we're okay. We'll stay in the square. But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. So here's Lot showing hospitality. But now compare it to the men of the city. See, this part of Genesis 19 illustrates why Lot is considered righteous because of his hospitality to strangers. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called out to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them. Now, the Hebrew word is yada. Yada actually means to know. It's one of those Hebrew euphemisms. And it can mean a lot of different things, but it can also mean to have sex with. The problem is that oftentimes we translate this as have sex with them. Okay? A better translation would be rape. Bring them out, we're going to rape them. That would be the better translation. Now some people say, I don't know, yada, to know, euphemism for sex. This was about, homosexual desire. No, it wasn't. It was about male-on-male rape, which is a very different thing. And there's reason to translate it out as rape. Biblical Hebrew is also full of euphemisms and sexual slang that may be difficult for modern readers to understand. Things like to lie with, to know, to come to uncover the nakedness of, are such examples, which in particular context means to have sex. Such phrases do not necessarily imply that this sex is forced by one person upon another and could actually describe consensual sex, but especially if the context of the narrative adds forms of coercion, such as violence and intimidation, upon someone, or claims that this serves as a punishment, then to rape becomes a plausible translation. This is written by Suzanne Scholes in her book, Sacred Witness, Rape in the Hebrew Bible, by Fortress Press. If you're really want to kind of look into the linguistics of Hebrew related to sex and rape, this is the book to read. One of the things that she points out is, even though there are multiple rape stories in the Old Testament, none of them were ever translated that way or considered rape stories except for the story of Tamar. That means even Dinah at Shechem wasn't considered a rape story until we began to understand, this euphemism in some contexts can mean just to have sex, and in other contexts it means rape. And you have to follow the context. That thing I keep talking about, how important context is. Such phrases do not imply that sex is forced by one person upon another and could actually describe consensual sex, but especially if the context of the narrative adds forms of coercion such as violence and intimidation upon someone, or claims that this serves as a punishment, then to rape becomes a plausible translation. So that's probably the best translation for what's happening in Genesis 19. Bring them out, we're going to rape them. Now, does male-on-male rape always show sexual orientation? That's the question I ask you. Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, no, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them, but don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. That's the rule of hospitality. If you're in my house, you're under my protection, I'll do everything I have to do to protect them. Taken to a pretty far extreme in that he'd offer up his 2 virgin daughters. Not in the context that we think of it, of, they're going to rape his virgin daughters, but as a property crime against him, since he owned his daughters, and it would reduce their property value. Hospitality demands Lot protect his guest. Women in this Bronze Age patriarchal period were seen as property. So here, I'll give you some of my property, leave my guest alone. Get out of her way, they replied. And they said, this fellow came here as an alien, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them. They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. So here's this intimidation, here's the violence that would make the word yada turn from sex to rape. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so they could not find the door. No greater example of inhospitality or mistreatment of strangers can be imagined than to arrive in a strange city and be brutally gang raped. How wicked this city truly is. Do you see the contrast between what Abraham did? He bows down low, he washes their feet, he offers them shade and comfort, he brings them fine food, he takes care of them. That's how he treats strangers compared to how the city of Sodom treats strangers. Do you see the difference? Their wickedness and unrighteousness is exemplified by the attempted rape of strangers. Rape, even male-on-male rape, isn't about sexual orientation. It is about power, dominance, and humiliation. Males raping males have been a devastating weapon of warfare because of the harm it inflicts on men. This is from a paper called Impunity or Immunity, Wartime Male Rape and Sexual Torture as a Crime Against Humanity. Right? Zawadzki et al. This is a research paper. They were looking into the use of male-on-male rape as a war crime at wars throughout history. It states that male rape and sexual torture has been used as a weapon of war with dire consequences for the victim's mental, physical, and sexual health. Wartime rape is the ultimate humiliation that can be inflicted on a human being, and it must be regarded as one of the most grievous crimes against humanity. This had nothing to do with the men's sexual orientation. This had everything about, we want to harm you, we want to destroy you, we want to humiliate you. We're going to show our dominance over you. In the story of Sodom, the males came to dominate and humiliate the visitors. This is about their wickedness, unrighteousness, and inhospitality. It has nothing to do with their sexual orientation. I have more evidence to talk about that a little bit later. But do you see the contrast? In the large story of Abraham, which is Genesis chapter 12, all the way through Genesis chapter 26, his righteous character is shown by the example of hospitality, which stands in contrast to the wicked character shown by the inhospitality of the people of Sodom. God is making a point. He blesses this man, Abraham, because he is taking care of others, and he destroys the people of Sodom because they harm others. That kind of sounds like Matthew 7:12, what Jesus taught us. So in everything, do unto others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. How we treat other people is very important to God. The men of Sodom were heterosexual. No, they weren't. They were gay. They wanted to rape these guys. No. The men of Sodom were heterosexual men who wanted to use sexual violence to humiliate strangers. There is no record of Sodom being a city of homosexual men. Other than how we choose to interpret it in the Bible, you can't find any evidence of this. Okay? First off, the concept of homosexuality didn't exist in that time period. Sexuality, ancient sexuality, was different than modern sexuality. Again, I would refer you to Kathy Baldock's book for an in-depth look at that. Josephus, the Roman historian, describes the city of Sodom in his book, Antiquities of the Jews, and he describes it this way. At this time, when the Assyrians had dominion over Asia, the people of Sodom were flourishing in riches and the number of their youth. It means they had a growing population. Their population was booming. Now, you explain to me how a whole bunch of gay men have a booming population. How do you have a whole bunch of births if everybody in the city is gay? You cannot have population growth as indicated in the flourishing of the number of youth in an exclusively all-male gay city. These were heterosexual men looking to commit war crimes against strangers in their midst. Now, the Bible does clearly state why Sodom was destroyed. After hearing God's decision to destroy Sodom, this is Abraham, Then Abraham approached him and said, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous people in it? Abraham begins to talk to God. He says, you're saying you're going to destroy Sodom, but what if there's righteous people down there? Would you destroy it? If there were only 50 righteous people in there, would you really destroy the city? And God's reply is, far be it from you to do such a wicked thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you, will you not judge all of the earth do right? And the Lord said, if I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. If I can find 50 righteous people, I'll spare the city. And I love this. This is Abraham coming back. He said, well, now that I've been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city because of 5 people? If I find 45 there, he said, I will not destroy it. I like the bargaining going on. Well, what happens if it's a few less? Not exactly 50. What if it's 45? He said, if I can find 45 righteous people there, I will spare the city. Once again he spoke, what if only 40 are found there, he said. For the sake of the 40, I will not do it. Then he said, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found there? And he answered, I will not do it if I can find 30 there. Abraham said, now that I have been so bold as to speak, Lord, what if only 20 can be found there? And he said, for the sake of 20, I will not destroy it. Then he said, may the Lord not be angry, but then let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there? And he answered, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. If you can find 10 righteous men in that city, I won't destroy it. So why was Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed? Because you can't find 10 righteous men there. They are a wicked city. They are completely unrighteous. You can't find 10 righteous men in that city. That's why it's destroyed. Sodom was destroyed because 10 righteous men couldn't be found. Had nothing to do with their sexuality, not because of homosexuality. Destroyed because you could not find 10 righteous men. That's why it was destroyed. It's right there in the text. That part that we keep ignoring. If you look at Ezekiel, chapter 16, verses 49 through 50, Ezekiel is talking to Israel and saying, you guys are acting in an unrighteous manner, and judgment's going to fall on you like it did to Sodom. And he says, behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom. When he says sister, it means you're just acting just like Sodom. You're acting like Sodom. Pride, the fullness of bread, and the abundance of wildness was in her, and in her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor or the needy. And they were haughty, and committed abomination before me. Therefore I took them away as I saw good. Does anybody see sexual rape in there? Does anybody see homosexuality in there? It's not there. They were prideful. They were gluttonous. They had they were lazy, and an abundance of idleness. They didn't strengthen the hand of the poor or the needy. They were unrighteous. They were haughty. They committed abominations. It's just not there. There was no singular sin. It was their unrighteous lifestyles that brought their destruction. You couldn't even find 10 righteous men in there. That's how wicked this city was. Interesting enough, if you look at Judges 19, it tells exactly the same story with just a few minor alterations. You don't really hear the story of Judges 19 very often. Everybody loves Genesis 19, but we don't tell the story of Judges 19 very often. It illustrates how the tribe of Benjamin, instead of the city of Sodom, it illustrates how the tribe of Benjamin and all of Israel had become unrighteous. Let me take a look at it. So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Gibeah in Benjamin. Who went on? A Levite priest and his concubine. A Levite priest and his concubine are traveling through the land. And they come to Gibeah in Benjamin. There they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square. Why are you sitting in the city square? You're waiting for somebody to ask you into their home. That's why. You're expecting hospitality. That's what you did. You're a stranger in the land. You stayed in the square. You waited till somebody invited you into their home. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them into his home for the night. That evening, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the men of the place were Benjamites. So this is setting up a contrast again. The Ephraimites are okay. Ephraim, the half-tribe from Joseph. But the Benjamites, not so much. Came in from his work in the fields. When he looked and saw the traveler in the city square, the old man asked, where are you going? Where did you come from? And he answered, we are on our way from Bethlehem in Judea to the remote area in the hill country of Ephraim where I live. I have been to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I'm going to the house of the Lord. No one has taken me into his house. We have both straw and fodder for our donkeys and bread and wine for ourselves and your servants, me and your maidservant and your young man with us. We don't need anything. In other words, look, we just need a place to stay. We don't need food for our animal. We don't need food for ourselves. We got everything we need. We just need a place to stay. We're not going to be an imposition. You're welcome at my house, the old man said. Let me supply you with whatever you need. Only don't spend the night in the square. So he took him into his house and he fed his donkeys. After they had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. Does this sound familiar? Some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house, pounding on the door. They shouted to the old man who owned the house, bring out the man who came to your house so that we can have sex with them. It's the same exact word, yada. There has never been a preacher. I have never heard one preacher who actually preaches on this passage who have said that all the men of Gibeah were homosexuals. Gibeah was a homosexual city. I've never heard that. Same exact story. The men surround the house and they demand that they send out the Levite so that they can rape him. And yet nobody preaches it this way. Oh, Genesis 19 will do it, but we won't do it for the same story in Judges 19. The owner of the house went outside and said to them, no, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this disgraceful thing. Is this sounding familiar? Look, here's my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. But to this man, do not do such a disgraceful thing. Again, this is Bronze Age patriarchy. Women are property. It'd be a vile thing to rape a man, but, hurt our property, that's okay. But the man would not listen to him, so the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped, again, it's the same word, yada, her, and abused her throughout the night. And at dawn, they let her go. At daybreak, the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight. So in this case, again, rape does not show sexual orientation. They were going to rape the man as an act of humiliation and dominance. Instead, they raped his concubine. When the master got up in the morning and opened the door of his house and stepped out to continue on his journey, there lay the concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house, with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, get up, let's go. Okay, that's cold and callous. I know you've been raped all night long, but come on, we got to go. All right, we got to get on our journey here. Okay, this is the way that they treated women back then. He said to her, get up, let's go, but there was no answer. Then the man put on his donkey and set out for home. She literally died. And this is kind of upsetting because I'm like going, where's the care and concern for women here? She was literally raped to death, and you're like, slowing me down. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it said, such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came out of Egypt. Think about it, consider it, tell us what to do. So he sends out body parts as a warning of how wicked the city of Gibeah is, how wicked the tribe of Benjamin has become. Do we see fire and brimstone coming down on this city? No. Do we see preachers preaching it as, Gibeah was a homosexual city? No. And yet it's almost exactly the same story. The men raped the concubine. It's the same word that's used in Genesis 19 passage. Not just have sex with, but to rape. And we should probably translate it that way. The heterosexual men of Gibeah planned to rape another man as a form of sexual violence and humiliation. So why don't we preach them as they're homosexual? Oh, well, because they raped this woman to death, that's why. See, we take things out of context and we don't get them. So looking at this, what should we do about it? Well, we must deweaponize the use of Genesis 19 by recognizing that it has been deliberately misinterpreted. This information, as I said, has been out there for decades. It's been out there longer than you think. I'm going to prove to you it's actually been out there for millennia. We choose to read into the story of Genesis 19 that it's a homosexual city, even though there's no evidence, and culturally and the history of sexuality shows that it is not possible for it to have been a homosexual city. That these men were homosexual when it was not possible. All the evidence says it's not. It wasn't destroyed because of homosexuality. The Bible tells you why it was destroyed. It was destroyed because it was an unrighteous city where 10 righteous men couldn't even be found. The correct information has been available for centuries, more than a millennia. I really want you to catch this next point. The Mishnah, which was finished in 200 CE, that means it's been around for how long? Over 1,900 years, almost 2 millennia, this information's been out there. And other rabbinic texts elaborate on the nature of these sins. Now, the Mishnah is the commentary written by ancient rabbis. You know, the people who wrote the Old Testament, the people who know it better than 21st century Gentile Christians. When they commented on it, these ancient rabbis commented on it, they focused on the inhospitality and unjust social practices. You have to deliberately misinterpret this text to weaponize it as a condemnation of homosexuality. Did you catch it? For 1900 years, we have had the correct interpretation, and we choose to ignore it because we turned it into a political wedge issue about 60 years ago. We have weaponized this passage because it serves a political purpose, and we don't even seek out the truth that we've had for 1900 years of how to correctly interpret this passage. If you choose to do that, you are bearing false witness against your brothers and sisters, and you're teaching false doctrine. Every preacher who stands behind a pulpit and teaches it as a condemnation of homosexuality is teaching false doctrine. They are a false teacher. They're teaching you bad information. And if you choose to do it, you're bearing false witness against your brothers or sisters in Christ. You're lying. You're breaking one of the top 10. And yet we choose to do this. But that's what I was taught. So I hear this all the time. Yes, here's this mountain of information. We can give you a mountain of information. We can show you all this evidence. That's not what I was taught. That's not what I believe. As though holding on to these false beliefs, this bad teaching, shows great faith. Well, that's the way I was taught, so I just have to hold on to it. You can attack me with facts and information and evidence, but no, my faith says no. That's not faith. That's not faith. Having faith isn't a stubborn holding on to incorrect teaching, but a lot of people think it is. They'll give you a false teaching, you give them a mountain of information to counter it, and they'll be like, I don't believe it. That's not what I was taught. I refuse to believe it. I have faith. No, you don't have faith. What you have is just plain obstinance and an unwillingness to learn. You know what faith is? Faith is seeking the truth and becoming more Christ-like. That's what faith is. And with that, let me close in prayer. Lord Jesus, as we approach you today, may we be people of faith who seek to faithfully serve you and to imitate you. May we be people of truth. The truth has been out there for so long, and yet we choose to misinterpret, we choose to lie, we choose to teach falsely because it serves a political narrative. Let us not allow ourselves to be manipulated, but instead to stand as light in this world, providing grace and inclusion in every possibility. We just pray these things in your name. Amen. Once again, if you found today's content helpful, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, ring the bell, give it a thumbs up, like and share this video. You can even help sponsor one of our weekly videos if you'd like. See Deborah about that. All these things help our community here and online and our growing YouTube channel, so we thank you so much for making it all the way to the end. This information has been out there for almost 2 millennia, the correct interpretation. And as this was turned into a political wedge issue, immediately people began writing responses to it, and they've been ignored. You have to choose to deliberately misinterpret this. Let me close with this benediction. As you leave this place, may you seek the path of love and grace to be inclusive. Let us de-weaponize misinterpreted scripture. God bless you all. Go in peace. You are dismissed. Thank you.
We are one in Christ, we are one in God, we are one in unity. We are one in truth, we are one in faith.